In the marble halls of Buckingham Palace, where whispers carry more weight than proclamations, a single envelope containing DNA test results threatens to unravel centuries of royal tradition. When Prince William of Astoria demands scientific proof of his wife, Princess Meghan's pregnancy claims, he sets in motion a chain of events that will expose family secrets, challenge the line of succession, and force a modern monarchy to confront its darkest truths. What begins as a private matter between husband and wife becomes a public spectacle that captivates the world as 3 generations of royals discover that some secrets are too powerful to remain buried, and some lies too dangerous to ignore. The morning fog hung thick over the Astorian royal estate as Princess Meghan Catherine Sterling walked through the rose garden, her hand resting protectively on what appeared to be a growing belly beneath her flowing emerald dress. The media had been circling for weeks, telephoto lenses capturing every angle, every gesture, every supposed sign of the pregnancy she had announced with such fanfare 3 months earlier. Inside the palace, Prince William Edward Sterling sat in his private study, staring at the latest tabloid headlines spread across his mahogany desk. "Royal baby on the way," screamed one. "Princess Meghan glowing in green," declared another. But it was the smaller headline tucked in the corner of the Royal Observer that had caught his attention. Palace insiders questioned timeline. William's marriage to Meghan had been the fairy tale the kingdom needed. She was a commoner, a successful actress who had captured his heart during a charity gala 5 years ago. Their wedding had been watched by billions, a modern love story that seemed to bridge the gap between the ancient institution of monarchy and the contemporary world. But fairy tales, William was learning, often concealed darker truths. The first seed of doubt had been planted by his grandmother, Queen Victoria Sterling, during their weekly private lunch 6 weeks ago. She had been unusually quiet, picking at her salmon while William discussed his upcoming tour of the Commonwealth nations. "William," she had said suddenly, her voice carrying the weight of 8 decades and 60 years on the throne. "I've been thinking about the announcement." "The pregnancy?" "Meghan's over the moon, grandmother. We both are." The Queen had set down her fork with deliberate precision. "The timing troubles me. The dates don't align with what the physicians told me during their last consultation." William had dismissed it then as the concerns of an aging monarch, perhaps confused about medical details. But the seed had taken root, and over the following weeks, other inconsistencies had begun to surface like bubbles in champagne. There was the morning sickness that seemed to come and go at convenient times, absent during important public appearances, but mysteriously severe when private obligations arose. There were the medical appointments that Meghan insisted on attending alone, despite royal protocol requiring security briefings for all healthcare visits. Most troubling was the conversation William had overheard 3 days ago between Meghan and her sister Sarah during a family dinner. "The padding needs to be more realistic," Sarah had whispered as they thought everyone was distracted by dessert. "The photographers are getting suspicious." "I know," Meghan had replied, her voice tight with what William now recognized as stress rather than pregnancy symptoms. "But we're too far in now to change course." William had excused himself from dinner that night, claiming fatigue, but sleep had eluded him. He spent hours walking the palace corridors, past portraits of his ancestors, wondering if any of them had faced such a personal crisis that threatened to become a public scandal. The next morning, he had made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable just weeks earlier. He called Dr. Harrison Mitchell, the royal physician who had served the family for over 2 decades. "Doctor, I need to ask you something in complete confidence," William had said during their private meeting in the medical wing of the palace. Dr. Mitchell, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen 3 generations of royal births, deaths, and everything in between, had nodded gravely. "Of course, Your Highness. Is there any way to verify a pregnancy without the mother's direct cooperation?" The doctor's expression had shifted from professional concern to something approaching alarm. "Your Highness, are you questioning the princess's condition?" William had struggled with the words. "How do you voice suspicions about your own wife without feeling like you're betraying everything your marriage represents. There are inconsistencies that concern me. Dr. Mitchell had been quiet for a long moment, weighing his words carefully. There are several methods, but all would require either her consent or other arrangements. What kind of other arrangements? A DNA test could confirm biological relationships after birth, but that's months away. There are also ways to test for pregnancy hormones through secondary sources, though the ethics of such testing without consent. He had trailed off, leaving the implications hanging between them. William had thanked the doctor and left feeling worse than before. The knowledge that his suspicions could be verified only made them feel more real, more dangerous. That evening, as Meghan prepared for bed, William had watched her through the bathroom mirror as she performed her nightly routine. She moved with the same grace she always had, but now he found himself analyzing every gesture. When she turned sideways to brush her teeth, he looked for the natural curve of pregnancy. When she bent to wash her face, he listened for any sound of discomfort that might indicate a growing child. "You're quiet tonight," Meghan had said, catching his eyes in the mirror. Just thinking about the tour preparations. He had lied, hating himself for the deception even as he felt trapped by his own doubts. Meghan had smiled, the same radiant smile that had first captivated him years ago. "I hate that we'll be apart for 2 weeks, especially now." She had placed her hand on her stomach in a gesture that had become automatic over the past months. "About that," William had said carefully. "Dr. Mitchell mentioned that travel during pregnancy can be complicated. Perhaps you should have another consultation before I leave." Something had flickered across Meghan's face, too quick to interpret, but too distinct to ignore. "I feel fine, William. Really. The morning sickness has been manageable, and the baby is healthy." "How do you know the baby is healthy? Have you had recent tests I don't know about?" The question had hung between them like a challenge. Meghan had turned from the mirror to face him directly, and, for a moment, William thought he saw something like panic in her eyes before her expression smoothed into practiced calm. "The usual checkups. You don't need to worry about every detail, darling. Trust me." But trust, William realized, was exactly what he was struggling with. As they lay in bed that night, Meghan curled against his side with her hand resting on what should have been their growing child. William stared at the ceiling and made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, he placed a call to Dr. Mitchell. "I want the DNA test prepared," he said simply. "Your Highness, are you certain? This path, once taken, cannot be undone." William thought about the weight of the crown that would one day be his, about the millions of people who looked to the royal family for stability and truth, about the child who might or might not exist, and about the woman lying beside him who had become a stranger. "I'm certain. But, Doctor, this must remain absolutely confidential until we have results." "Of course, Your Highness. But, may I ask, what has convinced you this step is necessary?" William was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of the palace awakening around him. Servants preparing for the day, security teams conducting their morning briefings, the distant sound of tour groups gathering in the courtyard. All of it represented a world built on tradition, ceremony, and the assumption that those who wore the crown were worthy of the trust placed in them. "Because," he said finally, "if I'm wrong, I need to know so I can make amends. And if I'm right." He paused, the implications almost too large to voice. "If I'm right, then everything we've told the world is a lie, and lies have a way of destroying kingdoms." As he ended the call, William walked to the window overlooking the courtyard where tourists were already gathering with cameras and hopes of glimpsing royal life. Soon, those same cameras would be focused on a scandal that would make every previous royal controversy seem trivial by comparison. He didn't yet know that by ordering the DNA test, he was setting in motion events that would reveal not just the truth about Meghan's pregnancy, but secrets that reached back generations, touching every member of his family and threatening the very foundation of the monarchy itself. The test was scheduled for the following week, disguised as a routine medical appointment. Neither William nor Dr. Mitchell could have predicted that by the time the results arrived, the palace would be dealing with revelations far more shocking than a false pregnancy, and the royal family would be facing their greatest crisis in centuries. Dr. Harrison Mitchell had served the royal family through 3 generations of secrets, but nothing in his decades of experience had prepared him for the conversation taking place in his private office 7 days after Prince William's request. The DNA test results lay in a sealed envelope on his desk, but it was the information he had discovered while preparing for the test that had left him sleepless for 3 nights. "Your Highness," Dr. Mitchell said as William entered the medical wing alone, having told his security detail to wait outside. "Before we discuss the results you requested, there's something else we need to address." William took the seat across from the doctor's desk, noting the unusual gravity in the older man's voice. "Is it about Meghan?" "Partially, but it's more complicated than we anticipated." Dr. Mitchell opened a thick medical file that looked as though it had been reviewed many times. "In preparing for the DNA analysis, I needed to access comprehensive family medical records. What I found raises questions that go far beyond the current situation." The doctor paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Your Highness, are you aware of any irregularities in the family's genetic records?" William frowned. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that would affect succession to the throne." Dr. Mitchell's voice was barely above a whisper, and he glanced toward the door despite knowing they were alone. "I discovered discrepancies in genetic markers that suggest complications in the royal lineage." The words seemed to echo in the quiet room. William felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What are you saying, Doctor?" Dr. Mitchell opened to a specific page in the file. 3 years ago, when your brother Prince Harry had that minor surgery, routine blood work revealed genetic markers that didn't match expected patterns. I dismissed it at the time as laboratory error and had the results sealed. But when I began preparing your family's genetic profile for comparison purposes, I ran additional tests on stored samples. He pulled out a series of lab reports, the scientific language, and numbers meaningless to William, but clearly significant to the doctor. The results are consistent and troubling. Based on genetic analysis, there's substantial doubt about whether your father, King Charles, is actually the biological father of both you and Harry. The room seemed to tilt around William. He gripped the arms of his chair, trying to process what he was hearing. "That's impossible. Are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Your Highness. I'm telling you what the science reveals. Either there were medical mix-ups decades ago, or..." He left the sentence unfinished. William's mind raced through the implications. His mother, the beloved Princess Diana, had been dead for nearly 3 decades, her memory sacred to the British people. His father had remarried and was now king. The line of succession, the legitimacy of the monarchy itself, could be called into question. "Who else knows about this?" William's voice was hoarse. "Only myself, and now you." The original lab technician who processed Harry's results died in a car accident 2 years ago. The current results have been processed by a private laboratory in Switzerland, with samples identified only by code numbers. William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard where life continued normally, unaware that the foundations of the kingdom might be crumbling. "And Meghan's situation?" Dr. Mitchell picked up the sealed envelope. "The tests confirm your suspicions. There are no genetic markers indicating pregnancy. The hormone levels are consistent with someone using artificial supplementation to mimic pregnancy symptoms." William turned back to face the doctor. "So she's been lying." "The evidence suggests a deliberately constructed deception, yes. But, Your Highness, given what we've discovered about the family genetics, this situation with Princess Meghan may actually be the least of our concerns." William sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. His wife was faking a pregnancy, and his entire family's claim to the throne might be illegitimate. "What do we do?" Dr. Mitchell had clearly been considering this question. "That depends on what you want to achieve. We could quietly handle the Princess Meghan situation privately, perhaps suggesting she suffered a miscarriage. But the genetic findings about your family..." He shook his head. "That's beyond my expertise to resolve. Could the genetic test be wrong?" Technically possible, but highly unlikely given the consistency across multiple samples and testing methods. We're looking at a 99.7% probability that the genetic relationships are not as officially recorded. William thought about his grandmother, Queen Victoria, who at 91 carried herself with the dignity of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. He thought about his father, King Charles, who had waited decades to wear the crown and now ruled with the confidence of birthright. He thought about Harry, living in exile after his own scandals, unaware that his royal blood might be as questionable as his royal behavior. "I need time to think," William said finally. "Of course, but, Your Highness, there are practical considerations. Princess Meghan's supposed pregnancy is becoming more public. The palace has announced that she's in her second trimester. Medical appointments are scheduled. Preparations for the nursery are underway. The longer this continues—" "I understand." William stood again, feeling decades older than when he'd entered the room. "Doctor, I need your absolute assurance that this information goes no further until I decide how to proceed." "You have it, Your Highness. But might I suggest consulting with someone who understands the constitutional implications? This isn't just a family matter anymore." William nodded grimly. The doctor was right. What had started as personal doubts about his wife's honesty had uncovered a scandal that could destroy the monarchy. And, somewhere in the palace, Meghan continued her charade, unaware that her deception had accidentally triggered the exposure of secrets far more dangerous than her own. As William left the medical wing, he passed a window overlooking the rose garden where Meghan was posing for photographers, her hand resting on her false belly, smiling for cameras that broadcast her image around the world. But now, instead of anger at her deception, he felt something approaching sympathy. Her lies were about to be the least scandalous thing the royal family would face. He made his way to his private study and locked the door behind him. On his desk was a secure phone that connected directly to Sir Edmund Blackwood, the palace's most trusted legal advisor and keeper of royal secrets. Sir Edmund had served the crown for 40 years and had guided the family through every major crisis of William's lifetime. But as William reached for the phone, he hesitated. Once he made this call, there would be no going back. The knowledge would spread beyond the medical wing, and decisions would have to be made that could alter the course of history. He thought about the crowds outside the palace gates, the tourists who came from around the world to glimpse royalty, the citizens who found comfort in the stability of ancient traditions. He thought about the Commonwealth nations that looked to his family for leadership and the delicate balance of power that the monarchy represented in the modern world. Then he thought about truth and the weight of lies that were already too heavy to carry. William picked up the phone and dialed Sir Edmund's private number. "Sir Edmund, it's William. I need to see you immediately. We have a situation that's going to require all of your expertise." "Of course, Your Highness." "How serious?" William looked at the medical reports Dr. Mitchell had given him. Then, at the window where he could see Meghan still posing for photographers, living a lie that was about to pale in comparison to the truths they were about to confront. "Serious enough to bring down the crown," he said quietly. "I'll explain when you arrive." Sir Edmund Blackwood had been the royal family's constitutional advisor and crisis manager for 4 decades. But as he sat in Prince William's study reviewing Dr. Mitchell's genetic analysis reports, his usually unflappable demeanor showed cracks of strain. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he set down the documents. And when he looked up at William, his eyes held a mixture of professional concern and personal devastation. "Your Highness," Sir Edmund said, his voice carefully controlled, "in 40 years of service to the crown, I have never encountered a situation with such far-reaching implications." William had spent the hour since his call pacing his study, trying to process the magnitude of what Dr. Mitchell had revealed. "What are our options, Edmund? Legally, constitutionally, practically?" Sir Edmund removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a habit William recognized as the older man's way of buying time to think. "The immediate issue, Princess Meghan's deception, is actually the simpler problem. False pregnancy announcements, while scandalous, don't threaten the fundamental legitimacy of the monarchy. We could manage that through careful public relations. And the genetic findings? That's where we enter uncharted territory. Sir Edmund opened his briefcase and pulled out several thick legal texts, their pages marked with yellow tabs. The question of royal legitimacy based on bloodline is complicated by centuries of precedent. But the simple truth is that if King Charles is not your biological father, your claim to the throne is constitutionally questionable. William felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him. Are you saying I'm not the rightful heir? Not necessarily. The law is more nuanced than pure genetics. Sir Edmund opened one of the texts to a marked section. There's legal precedent for presumptive legitimacy. If Charles was married to your mother at the time of your birth and acknowledged you as his son, you could be considered legitimate regardless of biological paternity. But that protection assumes the irregularity wasn't known at the time. If it can be proven that there was deliberate deception involved, particularly if your mother knew you weren't Charles's biological child. He left the sentence hanging. William walked to the portrait of his mother that hung on the study wall. Princess Diana smiled back at him, captured in a moment of genuine joy during his childhood. The idea that she might have deceived the world about his paternity felt like a betrayal of everything he had believed about her memory. There's another complication, Sir Edmund continued. If these genetic irregularities extend to Prince Harry as well, and if they become public knowledge, it raises questions about the entire line of succession. Parliament might demand a full genetic audit of the royal family. The implications were staggering. William tried to imagine the headlines, the constitutional crisis, the reaction of Commonwealth nations whose loyalty was built on the presumption of royal legitimacy. What do you recommend? Sir Edmund was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing options with the careful precision of someone who understood that advice given to royalty shaped history. We have several paths forward, none of them simple. He counted off on his fingers. First, we could suppress everything. Handle Princess Meghan's situation privately, seal the genetic findings permanently, and hope nothing else surfaces. This preserves stability, but leaves the family vulnerable to future revelations. Second, we could conduct a full investigation quietly, determine the truth about your parentage, and then decide how to proceed based on what we find. This gives us complete information, but increases the number of people who know the secret. And third, Sir Edmund's expression grew grimmer. We could get ahead of the story. Announce that irregularities have been discovered, order comprehensive genetic testing of the royal line, and let the constitutional chips fall where they may. This preserves integrity, but could destroy the monarchy. William returned to his chair, feeling suddenly exhausted. What would you do, Edmund, if you were in my position? The older man was quiet for a long moment. Your Highness, I've served your family since before you were born. I've seen the monarchy survive abdications, divorces, scandals, and wars. But I've never seen a situation where the fundamental legitimacy of the crown was in question. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. The monarchy's power in the modern world comes not from divine right or military force, but from the people's acceptance of your family's role. That acceptance is built on tradition, ceremony, and the belief that your bloodline connects you to centuries of history. So you're saying genetic legitimacy matters? I'm saying public perception of legitimacy matters. If these questions become public without careful management, the damage could be irreversible. William thought about his father, now in his 70s, who had waited his entire life to be king. He thought about his own sons, who were being raised to eventually wear the crown. He thought about the thousands of people whose jobs depended on the monarchy's continued existence, and the millions more who found meaning in the traditions his family represented. There's something else we need to consider, Sir Edmund said carefully. Princess Meghan's deception, while serious, is ultimately a private matter that became public. But if she discovers what we've learned about the family genetics, William felt a chill of understanding. Meghan had proven willing to lie to the entire world about pregnancy. If she learned that the royal family's legitimacy was questionable, she could use that information as leverage, or worse, as revenge if their marriage continued to deteriorate. She can't know, William said firmly. Whatever we decide about the genetic issue, Meghan cannot learn about it. Agreed. Which means we need to resolve her situation first, and carefully. William walked to his desk and pulled out a calendar. She's supposed to have a public appearance next week, some charity event for children's hospitals. After that, there are several more scheduled appearances building up to what should be the birth announcement in 4 months. We need to create an exit strategy that allows her to save face while ending the deception, Sir Edmund said. A staged miscarriage would be tragic, but believable. It would also generate sympathy and make it inappropriate for anyone to question the details too closely. The calculation involved in planning his wife's fake miscarriage made William feel sick, but he could see the logic. How do we approach her? Very carefully. She's committed to this deception, which means she believes she has more to gain by continuing than by confessing. We need to either change that calculation or remove her ability to continue. Sir Edmund pulled out a folder William hadn't noticed before. I took the liberty of having our private investigator look into Princess Meghan's background more thoroughly. There are some interesting findings that might be relevant. William opened the folder to find photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be communications transcripts. What am I looking at? Evidence that the pregnancy deception wasn't planned impulsively. There are records of purchases made months before the announcement. Medical supplies, prosthetics, hormonal supplements. This was premeditated and sophisticated. William stared at the evidence of his wife's elaborate deception, feeling a mixture of betrayal and reluctantly impressed surprise at the level of planning involved. Why would she do this? That's the crucial question. Understanding her motivation will help us determine how to resolve the situation. Sir Edmund pointed to a section of financial records. These purchases were made using a credit card linked to an account that receives regular transfers from her sister Sarah's business. There's also communication with several media contacts, suggesting this might be part of a larger strategy. The implications were disturbing. If Meghan's pregnancy deception was part of a broader plan, possibly involving her family and media manipulation, then the royal family was dealing with something closer to conspiracy than simple dishonesty. William closed the folder, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of what had started as simple doubts about his wife's pregnancy. Now he was facing questions about his own legitimacy, planning his wife's fake miscarriage, and trying to protect secrets that could destroy the institution he was born to lead. Edmund, I need your honest assessment. Can the monarchy survive this? Sir Edmund considered the question with the gravity it deserved. The monarchy has survived worse scandals, but never one that questioned the fundamental legitimacy of the bloodline. If we handle this perfectly, resolve Princess Meghan's deception quietly, keep the genetic findings sealed, and maintain the appearance of stability, then yes, we could weather this. And if we don't handle it perfectly, then we could be witnessing the beginning of the end of the British monarchy as we know it. William nodded grimly. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier, and he wasn't even wearing it yet. But as he looked at the evidence of his wife's deception and contemplated the secrets that Dr. Mitchell had uncovered, he realized that the next few weeks would determine not just his own future, but the future of an institution that had endured for over 1,000 years. The Game of Thrones, it turned out, was far more dangerous when played in real life than in fairy tales. The confrontation William had been dreading for 2 weeks finally came on a gray Thursday morning when Princess Meghan returned early from what she had claimed was a routine prenatal appointment. William was waiting in their private sitting room. The evidence of her deception spread across the coffee table like pieces of a puzzle that formed a picture he wished he had never seen. William. Meghan's voice carried a note of confusion as she entered the room and saw the documents. What's all this? William studied his wife's face as she approached, noting the moment when recognition dawned, and her expression shifted from curiosity to something approaching panic. She was still wearing the loose-fitting coat that concealed the padding she used to simulate pregnancy, and Seeing her now with the knowledge of her deception felt like watching a performance he could no longer believe. "Sit down, Meghan," William said quietly. "We need to talk." She remained standing, her eyes scanning the documents on the table. William could see medical reports, financial records, and photographs documenting her elaborate charade. "I can explain," she said finally. "I'm sure you can. You've become quite skilled at explanations over the past few months." William's voice was steady, but the pain beneath his words was unmistakable. "The question is whether anything you tell me now will be the truth." Meghan moved to the sofa across from him, but didn't sit. Instead, she began pacing, a habit William recognized from their arguments over the years. "How did you find out? Does it matter? What matters is that I know. We know. Dr. Mitchell has confirmed that you're not pregnant, that you've been using hormonal supplements to fake the symptoms, that you've been wearing padding to simulate the physical changes." William's voice grew colder with each revelation. "The question is why?" Meghan stopped pacing and turned to face him directly. For a moment, William saw a flash of the woman he had fallen in love with, vulnerable, uncertain, human. But it passed quickly, replaced by something harder. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "Try me." Meghan sat down finally, removing her coat with movements that seemed suddenly careful, as if she was aware of the artifice of every gesture. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be married to the future king and constantly compared to your predecessor? To know that everything you do is measured against Diana's memory?" William felt a flash of anger. "So this is about my mother? This is about survival," Meghan shot back. "Do you think I don't know what the press says about me? What your own family whispers? That I'm not royal enough, not British enough, not worthy of the title? So you decided to fake a pregnancy to prove your worth?" Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I decided to give them what they wanted, a continuation of the royal line, a fairy tale ending to our story. And it was working, William. The public loved the idea of our baby. Your approval ratings went up. The monarchy felt relevant again." William stared at his wife, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the calculating person sitting across from him. "And when the baby was supposed to be born, what was your plan then?" "There were options," Meghan said evasively. "Medical complications that would require privacy. Surrogacy arrangements that could be kept confidential. I hadn't finalized the details, but I would have found a way. You would have found a way to produce a fake royal baby. I would have found a way to give you an heir and the monarchy a future." Meghan's voice rose, and William heard desperation beneath the defiance. "Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Duty and bloodlines and keeping the crown secure." William thought about Dr. Mitchell's genetic findings, about the questions surrounding his own legitimacy that Meghan knew nothing about. The irony was bitter. She was lying to secure the succession while he was discovering that his own claim to it might be fraudulent. "Meghan, do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? You've lied to Parliament, to the Commonwealth, to millions of people who trusted our announcement. There are constitutional implications to false heirs." "There would only be false heirs if I hadn't found a way to make it real," Meghan replied. "And I would have. I always find a way." The certainty in her voice chilled William. This wasn't a woman who had made a desperate mistake. This was someone who had planned and executed a complex deception with full awareness of the consequences. "Who else knows?" William asked. Meghan hesitated, and William could see her calculating how much to reveal. "Sarah helped with some of the logistics. She has connections in the medical supply industry." "Anyone else?" "A few trusted contacts in the media. People who could help manage the story when the time came." William felt a sinking sensation. The deception wasn't just personal. It was a conspiracy involving multiple people who now had leverage over the royal family. "What did you promise them in exchange for their help?" "Nothing they wouldn't have gotten anyway. Exclusive access, interview opportunities, inside information about royal life." Meghan spoke as if these were reasonable business transactions rather than betrayals of royal trust. William stood and walked to the window, needing distance from the woman who had become a stranger. Outside, he could see tourists gathering for the changing of the guard. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the fairy tale they had come to witness was built on lies. "What happens now?" Meghan asked. William turned back to face her. "Now we figure out how to clean up the mess you've created without destroying everything my family has worked to build." "Our family," Meghan corrected. "No," William said quietly. "I think we both know that's no longer true." The words hung between them like a final verdict. William saw Meghan's facade finally crack, revealing the fear and desperation she had been hiding beneath months of performance. "William, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can find a way forward that protects everyone. The way forward is the truth, Meghan, or at least as close to it as we can get without destroying the monarchy." William moved to his desk and pulled out a folder that Sir Edmund had prepared. "Here's what's going to happen. Next week, you're going to have complications that require you to step back from public appearances. In 2 weeks, you'll suffer a miscarriage that will be tragic, but medically explainable. The details will remain private out of respect for our grief." Meghan stared at the folder without opening it. "And then?" "Then we figure out what kind of marriage we have left, if any." The brutality of the moment was not lost on either of them. They had once promised to love and honor each other through better and worse, but neither had anticipated worse would involve elaborate deceptions that threatened the stability of the crown. "I need some time," Meghan said finally. "You have until tomorrow to review the plan and agree to it. After that, the decision gets made for you." Meghan stood and moved toward the door, then stopped. "William, I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was protecting us, protecting our future." William looked at his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, he realized, and felt a sadness that went beyond personal betrayal. "The tragedy, Meghan, is that you might have been right about what the monarchy needed, but you went about it in a way that's made it impossible for us to ever trust you with that responsibility again." After she left, William sat alone in the room where his marriage had effectively ended, surrounded by the evidence of his wife's elaborate deception. But even as he planned her fictional miscarriage and contemplated their inevitable divorce, he knew that Meghan's lies were still not the most dangerous secret he was keeping. The genetic findings about his own legitimacy remained sealed in Dr. Mitchell's office, a time bomb that could explode at any moment. And somewhere in the palace, his father continued to rule as king, unaware that his son was questioning whether either of them had any right to wear the crown at all. The Game of Thrones, William was learning, was never really about who deserved to win. It was about who could survive with their secrets intact. 3 months after Princess Meghan's carefully orchestrated miscarriage, the royal family was still reeling from the aftermath when Dr. Mitchell's second bombshell arrived. William sat in the same medical office where his world had first begun to crumble, holding a new set of genetic analysis reports that made Meghan's deception seem almost trivial by comparison. "Your Highness, Dr. Mitchell said, his voice heavy with the weight of discoveries he clearly wished he had never made. "The additional testing you requested has revealed something extraordinary." William had ordered comprehensive genetic testing of preserved biological samples from 4 generations of his family, hoping to either confirm or disprove the troubling findings about his parentage. What the tests had revealed instead was a pattern of deception that reached back decades and touched every member of the royal line. "The results show that neither you nor Prince Harry are biologically related to King Charles," Dr. Mitchell continued, "but the genetics also indicate that you share the same biological father with each other, suggesting your mother had a consistent relationship with someone other than her husband." William stared at the scientific charts and graphs that reduced his family's most intimate secrets to data points and probability percentages. "Do we know who?" Dr. Mitchell opened another file, this one containing photographs and biographical information. Cross-referencing the genetic markers with individuals who had close contact with Princess Diana during the relevant time periods, there's only one probable match. He placed a photograph on the desk. James Hewitt, the former cavalry officer who had been Diana's riding instructor and rumored lover. The timing of his relationship with Diana corresponded exactly with the conception windows for both William and Harry. Major Hewitt is your biological father, Dr. Mitchell said simply. The genetic evidence is conclusive. William studied the photograph of a man he had met briefly as a child, trying to process the reality that this stranger was his actual father, while the king he had served and honored his entire life was not. The implications stretched far beyond personal identity. They struck at the very heart of royal succession. There's more, Dr. Mitchell continued. In conducting the genealogical analysis, I discovered that Princess Diana herself may not have been aware of the full truth. What do you mean? I found evidence suggesting that Diana's mother, Frances Spencer, had her own questions about Diana's parentage. There are medical records indicating that the Earl Spencer may not have been Diana's biological father either. The room seemed to spin around William. If his mother's legitimacy was also questionable, then the genetic irregularities in his family went back 3 generations. The royal bloodline that the monarchy's authority depended upon might be an elaborate fiction maintained across decades. Doctor, are you telling me that my entire family tree is built on lies? Dr. Mitchell nodded grimly. It appears that what we're dealing with isn't unusual genetic variation, but a multi-generational pattern of extramarital relationships and uncertain paternity. The irony is that Princess Diana may have been continuing a family tradition she didn't even know existed. William left the medical wing feeling as though the ground beneath his feet had permanently shifted. The revelation about Meghan's false pregnancy had taught him that his wife was a liar, but these genetic findings suggested that his entire concept of family, duty, and royal legitimacy was built on foundations of sand. He made his way to Sir Edmund's office, where the constitutional advisor was waiting with legal briefs and historical precedents spread across his desk like a battle plan. Your Highness, Sir Edmund said as William entered, I've spent the past week researching every possible legal framework for handling this situation. The conclusions are not encouraging. Tell me the worst of it. Sir Edmund picked up a thick legal brief. If these genetic findings become public knowledge, Parliament would almost certainly demand a full constitutional review. The question of your legitimacy as heir to the throne would become a matter of public debate and legal challenge. Could I remain as heir? Possibly, but only if Parliament chooses to change the fundamental basis of royal succession from bloodline legitimacy to parliamentary appointment. That would essentially transform the monarchy from a hereditary institution to an elected position, which defeats the entire historical purpose of royal rule. William slumped in his chair. So either way, the monarchy as we know it ends. Not necessarily, Sir Edmund said carefully. There is one precedent that might be relevant. He opened a historical text to a marked section. During the War of the Roses, questions of legitimacy were resolved through what was called conquest legitimacy, the idea that successful rule, regardless of bloodline, could create its own authority. You're suggesting I seize the throne through force. I'm suggesting that if you continue to rule effectively, with parliamentary support and public acceptance, the question of your biological parentage may become irrelevant over time. Legitimacy can be earned as well as inherited. William considered this, but the modern world seemed far more complicated than medieval precedents. What about Harry? He has the same genetic issues, but he's already removed himself from royal duties. Could we use that to our advantage? Prince Harry's exile actually helps us, Sir Edmund agreed. If he were still an active member of the royal family, questions about his legitimacy would be more immediate. As it stands, he's already effectively renounced his claims to succession. William thought about his brother, living in exile and controversy, unaware that his royal blood was as fictional as his royal behavior had been destructive. In a strange way, Harry's scandals and departure from royal life had solved one problem by creating distance from the genetic revelations. There's another factor we need to consider, Sir Edmund continued. The public's reaction to Princess Meghan's situation has actually strengthened your position. The sympathy generated by the miscarriage story, combined with the dignified way you've handled the marital difficulties, has improved public perception of your leadership. It was true. Meghan's fake miscarriage had been accepted without question by the public, and media. The subsequent announcement of their trial separation had been met with understanding rather than scandal, with most coverage focusing on William's grace under pressure rather than on any failures of his marriage. The cruel irony, Williams said, is that Meghan's lies may have accidentally protected us from the consequences of these much larger truths. Sir Edmund nodded. Her deception created a narrative of personal tragedy that makes it unlikely anyone will dig deeper into genetic questions. The public and media are focused on your recovery from loss, not on questions about bloodlines. William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the London skyline that stretched beyond the palace grounds. Somewhere in those buildings lived millions of people who looked to his family for stability, tradition, and continuity. The idea that he might be denying them these things based on genetic lies felt almost unbearable. Edmund, I need your honest assessment one more time. If I take the throne knowing what I now know, am I serving the British people or deceiving them? The older man was quiet for a long moment, weighing a question that went to the heart of royal authority. Your Highness, in my 4 decades of service, I've learned that the monarchy's value isn't really about bloodlines or genetic legitimacy. It's about providing stability, continuity, and moral leadership in an uncertain world. He joined William at the window. You've demonstrated all of those qualities, regardless of who your biological father might be. The question isn't whether you have royal blood, but whether you have the character to be royal. William thought about the events of the past months, uncovering Meghan's deception, managing the family crisis, protecting secrets that could destroy the institution he served. He had handled each challenge with discretion, wisdom, and concern for the greater good rather than personal advantage. So you think I should take the throne? I think you should continue to serve the British people as you have been doing, and let history judge whether your service has been worthy, regardless of genetics. William nodded slowly. The weight of his decision settled around him like a heavy cloak, but for the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity about his path forward. Then, that's what we'll do. The genetic findings remain sealed permanently. Meghan's situation is closed, and when the time comes, I'll accept the crown and do my best to be worthy of the trust placed in me. Sir Edmund smiled, the first genuine expression of relief William had seen from him in weeks. I believe that's what your mother would have wanted, regardless of her own complicated history. As William left Sir Edmund's office, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as doubts about his wife's pregnancy had uncovered secrets that could have destroyed his family and the monarchy itself. But it had also taught him that legitimacy wasn't something you inherited. It was something you earned through service, integrity, and dedication to something larger than yourself. The Game of Thrones, he realized, was never really about who deserved to win based on bloodlines or birthright. It was about who was willing to bear the weight of responsibility for the good of others, regardless of the personal cost. And as William walked through the halls of the palace that would one day be his to lead, he carried with him the knowledge that the crown's true power had never come from the blood of those who wore it, but from their willingness to sacrifice for those they served. In the end, that might be the most royal truth of all.